Good morning, Sohegan, and let's take a look at our polynomial graph intro. So the other day you looked at the degree of the polynomial, which is the highest exponent. You looked at the leading coefficient, which is the number in front of the variable with the highest degree, and that's going to help us determine whether or not our graphs go up or down. But what I thought we would do today is look at where do we find our x-intercepts. So here I have y equals x, and when we look at that graph, our x-intercept goes right through the origin. And now what I'm going to do is let's add, and by the way, that was, remember, a linear function. I'm going to add another factor. And when we add this other factor, it should look familiar that we should end up with a quadratic. And we can see here that we have an x-intercept at 0 and an x-intercept at 2. And remember, we can get that because we want our x-intercept, our y value is 0. And using the zero product property, we know that x has to equal 0. And that's where we get our two x-intercepts of 0, 0, and 2, 0. Well, let's look at what happens when we add a third factor there. So if we now look at our graph, we have an x-intercept at -1. We have our x-intercept at 0. And we have our x-intercept at 2. And notice that shape that we get. So I'm going to just go back and look. When we looked at our linear function, obviously we had a line. Let me try to differentiate these a little bit here. When we got our quadratic, we knew that we had a parabola. And now let's look here at the degree. So we have 3 x's, so this means this is an x cubed function. So it is cubic, and our graph looked like the letter N. Let's add one more factor there. And what shape do you think we're going to get here by adding that extra factor? So now we're going to cross the x-intercept 4 times, or the x-axis rather. And here is our graph. And what letter did we get there? We get the letter W. So if we have y equals x, x minus 2, x plus 1, x plus 2, we get x equals 0, we get x equals 2, we get x equals -1, we get x equals -2. In our next video, we'll talk about why, or some characteristics that we could notice between all of the functions that have an even number degree and all the functions that have an odd number degree. So when we look here, we have x to the 4th, and we called that a quartic. I'm going to leave the quintic up to you. So why don't you guys try to figure out what happens if I add a 5th factor to that graph. Thanks, and have a tremendous day.